So I'm getting a lot of questions on our last two videos on things like the process, the steps, how do we surrender to and be happy with what's happening now, and why should we do that, and just the creative process in general. So I want to start a series on the creative process and on the process, so to speak, that you can actually quantify and use scientifically, of course, for fun. Use it as an experiment, if you will, for moving from where you are now to where you want to be. And of course, the first step of this process is the hardest one for people to grasp. It's the hardest one for people to accept. It was the hardest one for me to accept when I got started on this self improvement journey, because people who are going into self improvement, even people who are going into spirituality and into manifesting, will say, well, Javier, I'm not happy and satisfied with where I am, obviously. Otherwise, I wouldn't be seeking this path out. Otherwise, we wouldn't be watching your videos and videos from other people. I've gotten a lot of emails to that effect. And so I just want to talk about this first step sort of the creative process. And it bears explaining that, first of all, none of this is necessary because you don't do it. The only reason it's necessary is for the old man, so to speak. You know, the Bible, Paul in his letters talks about putting off the old man and getting back into or taking on the new man. And of course, the old man is this carnal mind. It's actually what we refer to as the rational mind. The new man is the imagination. It is the spiritual man who can occupy a state in an instant. And of course, the I am is the only reality, as we've talked about in many videos. The I am, the unity. And that I am unity comes into duality, and it creates two. And then that two is, of course, the me and everything else besides me on the outer. So that rational mind, it's part of the two. And so it operates on the level of that duality, of that two-ness, of that multiplicity, so to speak. Now, the true I am, of course, can get into a state and be there immediately. And that's all that need be done, because if we were strong and if we had recourse to go within every single time there was a negative instance, or I don't even like using positive or negative, but every single time there's something on the outer that suggests I'm not in that state yet, as Bashar says, circumstances do not matter, only state of being matters. And we can just revert back to that state of being, and then we need do nothing else. But sometimes that outer man can be so clamorous, it can be so loud, that it can actually make us give up, and again make us fall into this delusion that we have to work for it and we're not there. So we've talked about many times on this channel of a concept called smoothing out the film roll. And I want to address that just a little bit. Of course, in Vadim Zeland's book, Reality Transurfing, and his other books, he talks about this concept of film rolls, which means that the universe is simply an agglomeration of every single potential chain of cause and effect. So every single chain of cause and effect you can imagine is in the universe. It would have to be, because otherwise the universe would not be infinite. And of course, if the universe is not infinite, then it is within something that is infinite. It would have to be. Or at least it would have to be within something that was on more of a time scale than it was, and then ad infinitum. So there has to be something infinite. So we have to assume that the universe is infinite. If it is infinite, then it would have to include all infinite potentialities. In fact, the name of God in the Bible, Yahweh, Yod He Vav He, we've talked about this in other videos, Neville talks about it. This is infinite. It has everything included within it, every potentiality. So, just to simplify, there's a film roll on which you just remain poor and die poor. There's also a film roll on which you go from poor to a little bit more wealthy to wealthier. There's also a film roll where you've always been wealthy, guys, and that's the easiest way to do this, because once you get into a state, you get onto a new film roll. And so not only are you on the film roll in the future, the past becomes that film roll. So we can indeed change the past. This has been proven in physics, and this is talked about a lot by Neville Goddard when he talks about revision and so on. So while we're getting onto another film roll, of course, we get onto that film roll the moment that we take on the state. But of course, the outer circumstances do not yield to that immediately. And here's the really interesting thing. We've talked about this in other videos. I've even made diagrams of this. This moment, this frame, guys, can be a frame in an infinite number of film rolls. So this second, right now, it can be in any number of film rolls. So I talked about this with a man, the example of a man walking down the street. There's a man in shorts walking down the street. He could be a homeless man. He could be a billionaire. And in fact, we've heard about a lot of billionaires that take public transportation. He could be a millionaire. He could be any number of things. But right now, all you see is a man walking down the street. So in your life, let's say you're working at a job you hate, guys. Well, this could be an undercover boss who's a billionaire working at a job he hates. Or this could be a man who's about to get fired and about to get poor. Or this could be a man who's just a middle-class man who works at a job and is going to work at that job for the rest of his life. You see where I'm going here. This film roll, or rather, this frame in a film roll can be an infinite film rolls. That means that this moment can yield to an infinite number of futures. And you choose the future. Of course, when you take on that imaginal state, when you take on the state, let's say you want to be a millionaire, right? Just to simplify. Well, you imagine yourself as a millionaire. You imagine what would happen after you became a millionaire, or you simply just declare it, or you do whatever you can do to get into that feeling state of being a millionaire. Of course, that feeling is not an emotion. That feeling is simply an assent and a knowing that you're a millionaire. Then you're there, but then you open your eyes. And because your rational mind is coming back into the fore, it starts interpreting the data that's coming to you as being on the same film roll. Then you simply revert back to that state of being on the same film roll, and you're on that film roll longer. Of course, you imagine it once and you've got it, but the length of time, guys, and the interval between now and getting what you want can become larger, of course, according to your vibrations. Abraham Hicks talks about this. Of course, there's a way to bypass this. We've talked about it before. But just getting back to the simple example. So what you want to do, guys, and of course we've talked about the fact that feelings don't matter, but feeling good feels good. And of course it keeps you more encouraged to stay on that film roll whereby you're getting onto the new film roll. I hope you understand me just a little bit. So in order to make yourself as comfortable as possible during that time interval, you do something called smoothing out the film roll. And here's how you do it, guys. There are many ways to do it. You, of course, take whatever actions you can right now, guys. You take whatever action you think is the next step right now. Make it a little easy, but you can also make it a little challenging. Of course, that's up to you, but you take that step. But here's the simplest way to do it, and this is the first step. Excuse me. What you do is, you wake up, let's say, that day, and you say, you know what? I am already on the film roll. Say you want to be a millionaire, of being a millionaire. I am a millionaire and I'm on that film roll. But what I'm going to do, in order to smooth out what's in front of me, since every single cause can yield every single effect, I'm going to have no preferences for today. And what I'm going to do is just be completely in the moment, and I'm going to do with love and full attention. You know, the greats called this karma yoga, which is just yoga, which is doing without expecting any outcome. See, Bashar talks about this. He said you follow your highest excitement and you don't have any preference or expectation as to the outcome. So I'm taking the next step, and whatever comes before me, I do that with love, I do that with full attention, and I'm not doing it for any ulterior motives because I know I'm already on my path and there's nothing I have to do to get there on my path. So I'm just on my path and I just allow myself to be completely present and pulled on that path. If you do that, guys, you get into that state of karma yoga. And as modern business writers call it, flow. Then you're going to be inspired. You're going to be pulled towards what you want. You're going to see synchronicities, guys. Why? Because you've got your rational mind out of the way. That's the first step. There are many other steps, guys. And we're going to talk about the creative process. But the first step is you just wake up and you start doing what is before you. You have to sweep a floor. You want to be a millionaire, but you're in a job now where they're forcing you to sweep floors, and you've been frustrated about it. You no longer become frustrated about it. You simply sweep that floor with full presence and full love, and you do the best you can, and you follow out your day like that. Another way of smoothing out the film roll is setting up little disciplines, guys, and we'll talk about this here in the next video.